remember that a number of events are planned really across the country to honor the late Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And today, that's what exactly we experience here at the St Marys Cathedral here in Joburg CBD. You'll remember my colleague Sipa has been reporting from this very same venue throughout the day. So this evening then what we saw or witnessed was a prayer service. Like you mentioned, it is in honor of the late Archbishop Emeritus Desmond Tutu. So essentially many of those programs will continue right up until Saturday, when he will, of course, or when the funeral service will happen. Let me bring in now Father Xolani Dlawathi. Dlawathi, yes. Thank you so much for your time. I want us to talk about the significance of this prayer service today. We know that the entire religious community is in mourning the passing of a giant, someone who really cared about everybody, regardless of where they came from, their skin color, or even their sexual orientation.
Of course, thank you very much. The significance of this service. Firstly, when we are ordained as priest, one of the commitments we make is to continue to be faithful to prayer, to be faithful to holding the people of God in our breast, which means in terms of prayer, to pray for them. And the evening and morning prayer are central to that part. So one of the commitments is daily evening and morning prayer. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu took that calling and very seriously. He was dedicated and committed to daily prayer, particularly morning and evening prayer. And therefore, as we pray today, we continue in his footsteps. We continue in the tradition that he always did. But more so today, the significance of this prayer was firstly to continue to give thanks for his life, for his ministry, and for his contribution, not only within the church, but within this country, within Africa, and actually globally. But the second significance, as well as you know, the nation is in mourning, the family is in mourning, the faith community is in mourning. In actual fact, all the sectors in the world and in Africa are in mourning. So it's to continue to pray for God's comfort, for God's strengthening, more so for the family, for Mama Leah and the family, but for all who have cherished and love Archbishop Desmond Tutu, and who feel very deeply saddened and aggrieved at this time. But also, as we pray for comfort, we also pray for the needs of this world. We have lost a giant. We have lost a man who was committed to social justice. We have lost a man who was committed to the transformation of the lives of God's people. And therefore today we bring all those needs and challenges before God. Because even though he fought, even though he has finished his race, the baton has been left with us. We still live in a divided world. We still live in a divided society. We still live in an impoverished world. And we therefore are bringing the needs of God's people to the fore. And those are, for me, were the three significant, important things about why we did this service. But of course, we can never leave this one, celebrate his life and celebrate his legacy.
Absolutely. Speaking of legacy, talk to us about the kind of legacy that he leaves behind, particularly for the religious community.
For me, one of the legacies he leaves behind for the religious community is the reminder that we, particularly as leaders of the church, but more so including the church in general, is to remember the core and the fundamental of why we exist as the Church of God. Is to remember the fundamental and the core why we are called to be leaders of the church in our time. And therefore, for me, particularly for the faith community, is to continue to be committed to the mission of God. We are not called for rosy times. We are not called for prestige. We are not called for fame. But we have been called to get dirty and make sure that the lives of God's people are better than they were. So for me, that's the first legacy. But the second legacy for me that he actually leaves is his commitment to actually reconciliation. It's his commitment to building bridges. And I think that we need so much in our world. You know, not only racially, not only ethnically, but even religiously. We continue as religious people to behave as if we don't worship the same God. We continue to belittle other religions and those who are different from us. We continue to play games with God. But what Archbishop Desmond Tutu reminds us, we all matter. We believe in one God. Doesn't matter whether you're a Christian. It doesn't matter whether you are Muslim, whether you are Hindu, whether you are Greek or African culture. We are all one human race. And that for me is a legacy we must never forget. But also as a church in particular, he leaves a legacy of reminding us that the doors of the church must be open to all. A church is not for holy people. Holy people belong in heaven. A church is for those who are battered and bruised by the world. And when they come to our churches, they must come and feel the embrace of God's love. No matter who they are, where they come from, what's their status or sexual orientation, all belong to God.
Father Xolani Dlawathi there, he's the Dean here at the St Marys Cathedral. From that, Tutu, you can already imagine what we experienced this evening. So, of course, those events will continue happening. We understand tomorrow the Mayor in the city of Johannesburg, Dr. Mpho Phalatse, including the Dean and the Bishop, will, of course, be heading to the Tutu home in Soweto. That's where another program will be happening around midday.